Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode on my try podcast recording. Um, Wanted to take a step away from focusing on really like everything that's going on. I, as many women are, many people are, very empathic, and being a mother during these times is, whew, but I don't want to like ignore what's going on, but you gotta do it in like doses because if I keep paying attention, my ass is gonna start, you know, "Mm, y'all aren't doing it, I'll do it." But I digress. I wanted to talk about something that I absolutely love getting and love doing for people. I was learning about these things, and I'm sure you read the title. It's past lives. So I didn't get into learning about past lives until I was probably in the like my mid to late 20s. And I was working at this uh I call it a spiritual center because it was really like all encompassing. It was a bookstore, it was a cafe, it was a yoga center, like meditation center, coaching center, readings. I mean, we did everything there. And one of the readers that worked there, I was like talking to her, and I was telling her how I was having like this reoccurring dream of being burned alive. And it's like my biggest fear, uh, next to being buried alive. And she was like, "Oh, hold on." And she like walked back to her little room and came back, and she was like, "Okay." She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "You were one of the ones that were burned in your past life." And I was like, Wait, what? Come again?" Oh, okay. Past life. And she, did a reading for me right then and there, and was talking about how I keep coming back during times of revolution and rebellion because I am very outspoken spirit. I am a very, like, I was literally like created. I want to say it's like an Aquarius. It's like injustice. Oh my God. But she said, like, people like myself and herself, like we keep coming back to guide, to help, to facilitate. And she's like, you came back and during the trials, and she's like, you were one of the ones to speak out for others. You've been a witch for like many, 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 many years, many lives. And, you know, that was my first introduction to it. It wasn't anything like serious. It was just like in passing, but it was the like catapult to get into that. And through this like mini reading, I started to read books. I started to do readings for myself. I started to do meditations. I started, paying people who do it for a living and then getting readings from them. And it's so fascinating, dude. Past lives are the coolest thing to look into. And so many people want to be famous. Like when people are like, "Oh, I've had a past life. I was Marilyn Monroe. I was, John Wayne. I was, Alexander the Great." Well, billions of people cannot be the same person. I'm sorry. Um, some of us, yes, have been important people, but no, not all of us can be famous people in the 60s or 70s. Why is it always the same decade? Uh, and ancient times. Like a lot of people that I've given past life reading to, they always want to be either like a celebrity between the 60s and like 90s, or like an ancient heroic warrior person. One person I read for uh, was like, "Oh, I was Nefertiti. I was Cleopatra." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's look into it." actually, no, you weren't even that gender. You were somebody from Italy that left their family for America. Sometimes it's that simple. I digress. I also would love to know that I was a powerful person in my past lives. But sometimes it's just you were just a regular person. You were just a Joe Schmo. But it doesn't mean that that life was insignificant, because so many of us that continue to come back and keep, reliving lives, or, coming back into these realms, or, other planets, and, we're there for a reason. We keep coming back for a reason, whether it's to heal something for ourselves and our souls, or to help others. I know that this life, I was meant to come into this life to help others, to bring awareness, to open people's minds, to help them become powerful again. I solidified this by, well, I'm trying to learn human design. Y'all, if you understand human design, please help me, because it's very confusing to me for some reason. But between astrology and like I said, my human design, I'm a projector. I'm someone that helps facilitate people's manifestations. I'm someone that helps facilitate healing and guides them into their true selves and their higher forms. And uh, you know, I lost my train of thought. Man, I need more coffee. Hold that thought. Like I said, I don't ever write notes down. I don't ever read a script, y'all. It literally is just, this is how I am. But in the past few years, probably since, 2020, I have gotten more and more past life readings. Like, it's just something I'm so fascinated by. And I've realized that I have come back into so many lives as a similar type person in each life. One reading I got, I was not really like a treasurer, but I was like the keeper of the town's like funds, and like an advisor to the sorry, I don't know the word, but like the Viking king. I was in a Viking village. I was a man, which is kind of awesome. I dig it. Uh, and then one past life reading I got was like my favorite one. And it was similar. I was still from a Viking village. I sailed across the ocean to travel and learn about different cultures and read about different cultures. And uh, I even m- moved and lived in um, Genghis Khan's like empire, to learn about like all of that. And it's the reason I say this is because when we learn about our past lives, right, things in our present life make so much sense. So, for example, in every past life reading I have gotten, I've never had an honest relationship, or have never had a long lasting relationship. And it's so interesting when I hear this, because I have told so many people, I have told therapists, I've told spiritual coaches, I've told leaders, I have told so many people that for as long as I can remember, I've always looked for that other person. And it's not a feeling of like, I just love to be in love. It's that feeling of like wanting that connection, that missing part of my soul, that missing partner. And even when I would be in relationships, I would still have that feeling of, I don't really think this person's the one. Um, and I would still feel that lost sensation, like I was still searching for that person. When I met my husband, that feeling stopped. And I asked one of my past life readers once about that, and they were telling me how it is because that is what we like literally will keep coming back in each life to try to find each other kind of thing. And it's not even, I'm not trying to be romantic or like fantasy, it's very, very metaphysical, and it's so fascinating. Another thing that I find interesting is that past life where I was traveling with Genghis Khan's empire and living in an Asian influenced community and learning about that culture. That trickled down into this life. Ever since I can remember, I have always had an affinity and admiration for Asian cultures. I've had knowledge of things that, like, Jewish folk from Miami, y'all. Like, it's not like my parents. The only like Asian influence I had growing up was Chinese food on Sunday dinner. So, and I don't say that to be like racist. I'm not saying that they kept me from it, but like, it's to show that no one taught me how to use chopsticks. I just knew how to do it. I like knew how to do certain things, didn't like continuing the like past lives into present lives. I am obsessed with archery. I love archery. And one of my past lives, I was an archer. And they say that birthmarks, and like freckles and things like that are another evidence of our past lives. Well, I have a birthmark on my shoulder, on my stomach, and on my hip. And uh, when I got a reading about it one time, they were like, "Oh yeah, this is how you died, and you died in battle. These are where the arrows hit, and it's literally like all on the same side. Crazy, but fascinating." And then it was solidified years ago, almost God, it was 10, 12 years ago now. I went to an archery class, and literally within 5 minutes, I was doing bullseyes. I mean, she, even the teacher couldn't believe it. She was like, "Have you ever done this before?" "No, I just know how to do it," kind of thing. And again, this was like another evidential proof, like that my past lives are coming into my present. I it just it's so cool. Uh, the pictures that I am posting on this podcast post, if you look down, this was a picture one of my best friends found years ago, right before I moved to Colorado. She was, as most of us do, she was watching a serial killer documentary, and the serial killer would put his uh, victims like information and like trinkets and like stuff that he wanted to keep from them in storage units across the country, and one of the storage units had those pictures in it. That is not me, but it is me. That is not anybody I know. No one knows this person's name. Like, she just disappeared. And y'all, seriously, like, how, if that doesn't prove to you that past lives exist, I don't know what does. Like, look at those pictures. That's me, but it's not me. Like, I wish there was a pause button so I could like do my like, you know, uh, there's, uh, oh, and like soul contracts. So I keep seeing this on how like people are trying to water down what soul contracts are. So through all my certification courses, education, things like that in the spiritual community, I have learned that soul contracts are not just romantic or platonic. They're also with like family. They're also with just random people that change our lives. And my family, uh, we have lived lives together because there's certain ones of us that we keep coming back into lives as different like different positions in the family because we keep wanting revenge on the other soul. So for example, my mother and I in this life, okay, like she is very toxic, very narcissistic, that whole thing, right? But apparently in one of our past lives, I was the mother and she didn't like that I was the mother. And I was the one that was, I don't want to say narcissistic, but I kept trying to inform her, like keep her, like don't do this, don't do that, right? So in revenge, she's now the mother and she's taking it out on me. Not that she knows this, not that I knew this. Same with my father. My father and I are very connected. We keep coming back in each other's lives like a rubber band. We are very, very connected. Um, I This is a whole nother podcast episode, but I am very convinced that my father came back through my daughter. And we're just keeping that circle going. I've met people in like soul contracts through friends that, help me through certain situations. So past lives and present lives blend together. I know that there are certain things that I'm not going to accomplish in this life that I'm going to have to accomplish in another life. And so fascinating. So I don't really want to take too long on this podcast because this was more of just do you believe, do you not believe? And like, how do you feel about past lives? And if you've ever gotten a past life reading, I now do past life readings because I love learning about other people's past lives as well as my own. I love uh, connecting the dots between past lives and our present lives and like what we need to heal or what we need to learn, what we need to connect. Like I said, like I love connecting the fact that like I just knew things but I don't know how I knew things. um Same with like languages. Like if you've ever just like had an affinity with something and you just knew a language before like you knew a language. um one of my best friends, she is very, very connected to uh, the Jewish culture, and we did a past life reading for her. Come to find out, she was in the Holocaust. She was Jewish. She was in Germany during the war and had to hide in, a safety room. She was found. She went through the Holocaust. She died in a concentration camp. And once we figure out that, like now, she's kind of like healing that aspect by learning about it and practicing certain things. uh, and I talked about, I think in my last episode, about I feel like that's why I'm so connected to the like Greek culture. I mean, when I say I am gluttonous with Mediterranean food, it is, want to get me a gift, get me a gift card to like a Greek restaurant, and that'd be like, mm, I think I could eat my weight in fucking hummus and olives. And pita bread. Oh god, now that makes me so hungry. Same with the Greek pantheon. I don't have very many ties to like Greek culture. Um, Although my husband did point out, he's like, "Oh, you do know where like you were family from this current life, like that heritage, like that that was like close to the Mediterranean, so that's probably why, like, you know." So like, here's some things to like jot down and to work through. Think of things that you weren't taught that you knew. Think of things that you loved before you learned, or things you just knew how to do before you learned about them. For example, can you create a meal that you didn't know the ingredients or didn't have a recipe, and you just created it and it ended up being, I want to say, like a historical meal, but like, like that, like ancestral, like just knowledge, right? These are all like clues to your past life. So write all this stuff down. Okay, I think my baby's waking up. I love you. Have a great one.